Alright, so when we estimate, we are not going to solve the problem all the way through. We're going to take our best educational guess at what we think the answer is. So for number 1, you're going to want to ask yourself, what is 2/3 of 8? Well, I think 1/3 would be around 3, so then 2/3 would give us 6. And then for 2, you would ask yourself, what is 1/6 of 17? Or as I would like to think of it, around how many times does 6 go into 17? And I would say around 3 times, because that would give us 18. So 1/6 of 17 would be around 3. And then same thing for number 3. Around how many times does 3 go into 16? I would say around 5, because that would give us 15. So 1/3 of 16 would be around 5. And 1/4 of 17 would be around 4. So number 5, estimate by rounding to 0, 1/2, or 1. So what you're going to ask yourself is 5/8 closer to 0, 1/2, or 1? And I would say 5/8 is closest to a half, because a half would be 4/8. So I would write 1/2 right here, just so we remember what it's closest to. And then for 4/3, I would say that one is closer to 1 than 0 or a half, because 3/3 would give us 1. So I would say 4/3 would be closest to 1. And then 1/2 times 1 is just going to give us 1/2. Same thing for 6 is 4/5 closer to 0, 1/2, or 1. I would say 1. And then for 1/8, I would say that's closer to 0. 1 times 0 is going to give us 0. Multiply and write the answer in simplest form. So remember, for multiplying fractions, we're going to do top times top and bottom times bottom, or numerator times the numerator, denominator times the denominator. So this is going to give us 24 over 63, and then we can simplify this even more down to 8 over 21. And remember, when we simplify, we're saying what number goes into both 24 and 63, and that number would be 3. So we just divide the top by 3 to give us 8, and the bottom by 3 to give us 21. Again, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. And this one we cannot simplify anymore. Alright, number 13. We have 13 times 1/3. So remember, when we have a whole number, we can always turn it into a fraction by putting it over 1, because 1 goes into 13 times. So again, numerator times numerator. 13 times 1 is going to give us 13. Over 1 times 3 is 3. And then we are going to want to write that out as a mixed number. So we are going to ask ourselves, how many times does 3 go into 13? It's going to go in 4 times with 1 left over. So you should get 4 and 1/3. Same as the last one, we're going to do 9 over 1, because that's the same as 9. We're going to multiply that by 2/3, and that is going to give us 18, because 9 times 2, and then over 1 times 3. And then how many times does 3 go into 18? It goes in 6 times, and we will just leave it at that. Now we are getting into mixed numbers. So remember, when we multiply fractions, if we have a mixed number, we have to turn that into an improper fraction. So we do that by multiplying the 4 times the 5 and adding the 3. So we will end up getting, give me a second, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23, over 5 times what are we going to do here? We're going to turn this mixed number into an improper fraction. So we're going to get 2 times 6, which is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 6. And when you multiply that out, you are going to get 299 over 5 times 6 is 30. And then we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 30 go into 299? It's going to go in 9 times. So it's going to go 9 times with 29 left over. Once again, we've got some mixed numbers, so we have to turn them into improper fractions. So we're going to go 4 times 2 gives us 8 plus 3. We're going to give 11 over 4. Multiply that by 3 1/8. But first, we're going to have to turn 3 1/8 into an improper fraction. 8 times 3 gives us 24 plus 1 gives us 25 over 8. And then, just with all fractions, go numerator times numerator. It's going to be 275 over 8 times 4, which is 32. Then we're going to say, how many times does 32 go into 275? It's going to go in 8 times with 19 left over. Into the story problems. So we have 21. Alyssa got 15 pounds of candy from trick-or-treating. Her mom said she can have 3/5 of her candy, but has to give 2/5 of her candy to her little brother Timmy. How many pounds of candy does Alyssa get? How many pounds does Timmy get? Draw a picture and show your work. So if I were to start with a picture, we'll switch up the color here. I would draw a bar. And we're dealing with fifths, so we're going to want to break this up into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there we have our fifths. And let's see, Alyssa gets 3 of them. So this is all for Alyssa. She's going to have more cavities than her brother. This is for her brother, Timmy. He gets 2. And then all together, this is 15 pounds of candy. So now into the math part. So, her mom said that Alyssa can have 3/5 of her candy. And the key word here is going to be of, because we know that means multiplication. They are one and the same. Of means multiplication, multiplication. Multiplication also means of. So we know it's going to be 3/5 of, or multiplied by 15. And we know if we have a whole number, we can just put that over 1. So we're going to end up getting 15 times 3. Because remember, we're going to go top times top. So 15 times 3 is 45. We are going to put that over 5 times 1, which is 5. And then if we simplify this, ask ourselves how many times does 5 go into 45? We're going to get 9. So we have 3/5 of the candy is 9 pounds. So if 3/5 equals 9, then 1/5 is going to equal 3, because we're just going to divide the 9 by 3 to deal with 1/5 instead of 3/5. So if we know that 1/5 is 3, we can go back up to our little bar up here and fill in 3's, because each fifth is worth 3. And then we know that Alyssa will end up getting 9 pounds of candy. Holy smokes. And Timmy will get 6. So just to restate that, Alyssa is going to get these 3 plus 3 plus 3. She gets 9. And Timmy is going to get these 3 plus 3. So he gets 6. Alrighty, moving on to the second page. Number 22, Mr. Kettlehut borrowed 3/4 of Mr. Voigt's 64 pack of markers. How many markers did Mr. Kettlehut borrow? So we are trying to find 3/4 of 64. So I would start, if we want to draw a picture, by drawing that bar like we drew in the last problem. And we're dealing with fourths, so we're going to split it into fourths. And we know that this whole entire bar is worth, it's going to be worth 64. And Mr. Kettlehut borrowed 3/4 of this bar. So he borrowed this right here. So we'll draw this over here. This is Mr. K. So he's got these 3 right here. And once again, the key word here is going to be of. So we know it's going to be 3/4 of 64, or times 64. We know that 64 is the same as 64 over 1. And we got to multiply across. 3 times 64. Well, that one's a little tricky, so let's move on to the bottom. We're going to get 4 on the bottom. And then 64 times 3, it's going to be 192. Then we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 192? And it goes in 48 times, evenly. So Mr. Kettlehut ended up borrowing 48 of Mr. Voigt's markers. And then if we want to fill in the box here, the drawing, we know that these 3 are 48. So we can write that over here. So if it's 48 for all 3, we're just going to end up dividing 48 by 3. That's going to give us 16 for each box. And then again, final answer, zoom out, it's going to be 48. Alrighty, moving on to 23. 1/3 of the students in the school are 6th graders. 2/3 of those 6th graders said that math is their favorite subject. What fraction of the whole school are 6th graders with math as their favorite subject? So the fraction we're trying to figure out here is, out of everybody in the whole school, how many of the students are 6th graders with math as their favorite subject? So to start, we have 1/3 of the students in the school are 6th graders. And then next number, we've got 2/3 of those 6th graders said that math is their favorite subject. So we're going to need to multiply this by 2/3. Multiply across, we're going to end up getting 2 over 9. So of the whole entire school, 2/9 of the school are 6th graders with math as their favorite subject. Number 24, last word problem. I have 5/6 of a candy bar. I only want to eat 2/3 of that right now. How much of the whole candy bar am I going to eat right now? So we're starting with 5/6 of a candy bar, and we want to eat 2/3 of 5/6. So keyword of, I'm going to multiply 5/6 by 2/3, and that is going to give us 10 over 18. Or what can we do to these two numbers? We can divide them both by 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. And that is going to give us 5 over 9. So right now you are going to eat 5/9 of the candy bar. Moving on to reciprocals. Find the reciprocals of the following numbers. 25, we have 8/9. So the reciprocal is just flipping the fraction over. So zoom in here. We flip this over. Instead of 8 over 9, we're going to get 9 over 8, or 9/8. Over to 26, we have 1/6 to start with. If we find the reciprocal, it's going to end up being 6 over 1, or 6. For 27, we have 3/5. So if we flip that over, 5/3. And 29, we have 2. So how can we make 2 as a fraction? We can just put it over 1, and then the reciprocal is going to end up being 1 over 2, or 1/2. Alrighty, moving on to the last section here. Switch up the color. So we're going to divide, and then we're going to write the answer in simplest form. So for 31, we have 6 divided by 2/5. So for starters, I would rewrite 6 as 6 over 1. And then when we divide, we're not actually going to end up dividing. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply not by 2 over 5, but by 5 over 2. So we're going to flip and multiply. And then we end up getting 30 over 2, or 15. And going down to 33, we have 2/3 divided by 2/5. But instead of dividing, we're going to flip and multiply. So multiply by the reciprocal of 2/5. So that's going to be 5 over 2. And that is going to give us 10 over 6. But that's not quite the simplest form. We're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 6 go into 10? It goes in once, with 4 left over. Oh, but that is also not the simplest form. So we're going to go one more time. We're going to divide 4 by 2 and the 6 by 2. We're going to end up getting 2/3. So 1 2/3 is going to be the final answer for that one. Going over to 34, we have 1/2 divided by 1/3. So we're going to flip and multiply. We are going to end up getting 3 over 2, or 1 1/2. 35, we're almost there. Oh no, we have a mixed number here. So first things first, we're going to have to turn this mixed number into an improper fraction. And again, we're going to do that by multiplying the 3 times the 5 to give us 15. And then we're going to add 1. So we're going to get 16 over 3 divided by 2/3, but we're actually going to flip and multiply. So we're going to multiply by 3/2, not 2/3. And we are going to get, 48 over 6. And then we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 6 go into 48? And that is going to be 8 times. And the very last one, you made it. We're going to have 3/4. Oh, but then we have a mixed number here. So we have to do 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is going to be 13 over 5 as the improper fraction. But then we have to multiply by the reciprocal of that. So it's going to end up being 5 over 13. And we are going to get 15 over 52. And that is the simplest form already. And that is it.